Hi, I'm Colleen Cashman. Welcome to today's presentation. You're probably watching this with a healthy amount of speculation, and that's okay. So I'm just going to dive right in. The content in this webinar will change your life. Spontaneous sobriety is when, after years of drinking, you just decide to stop. That may sound impossible, but it's no joke. Once I share with you the 5 simple shifts to freedom from alcohol, you'll know that spontaneous sobriety is not only an option, it's doable and enjoyable and desirable. Let's start with who this is for. This is for anyone who has noticed that their drinking has become a problem. If you're struggling with what or how to change, this is for you. In the next 45 minutes, you will learn how to overcome your dependence on alcohol, even if you can't imagine life without it, and how to shift from drinker to non drinker without losing your identity and rediscovering your authenticity. How to frame the decision to quit drinking from a place of strength instead of weakness, and how to move forward with clarity, energy, and motivation without getting sidetracked by cravings for alcohol. You'll also learn how to stop drinking without feeling like you're missing out or being punished, and how to ascend to a new level of vitality and self assurance that people around you will not only notice but compliment. I'll show you how to navigate social settings like a badass without drinking alcohol, and how to quit drinking because you want to, not because you have to. My promise to you is to share the 5 simple shifts that will cancel your desire to drink. The truth will set you free spontaneously. If you're hoping that what I'm saying could make a difference, it already is. Now, before we talk about solutions, we need to be clear about the problem. Do you try to follow rules to control your drinking, but find it's impossible to stick with them long term? Rules like only drinking on certain days or with certain people or in certain circumstances, limiting yourself to 1 per hour or alternating with water or switching from spirits to beer or wine or lower alcohol contents or alternating brands or trying to take breaks to reset your tolerance. Rules. Are you secretly jealous of people who give up alcohol and then brag about how good they feel? I mean, to be honest, you're watching this webinar, so you're at least kind of impressed. Do you repeatedly promise yourself and maybe your partner that it won't happen again, only to go back on your word? Do you minimize how much you drink when you're around friends and feel ashamed? No one, maybe not even you, knows how much you really drink. Do you feel embarrassed when you recall or are reminded of things you've said or done when drinking? Do you eat healthy and exercise and try to think positive, only to sabotage yourself with alcohol? Do you secretly factor in your drinking habits when making evening or early morning commitments? Do you often feel exhausted and know that alcohol is sapping your energy and resilience? And finally, the most important question, really the only one that matters. Do you wish that you drank less, but feel hopeless about your ability to change? Or more accurately, feel hopeless about your inability to change? Well, those are real problems, but most accurately, they're symptoms of the problem. The real problem is that you haven't made the shifts. You're stuck in a mindset that's working against you. But don't worry. If any of this sounds like you, you're on the cusp of spontaneous sobriety. You're ready to level up. This is an invitation from the universe to change your life. And if you're listening to this, you're more ready than you think. Once you make the 5 mindset shifts, you'll feel so much less stressed overall and no longer reach for a drink to calm yourself. You'll love feeling secure and confident and knowing you are capable of keeping your promises. You won't feel pressured to drink socially, and people will be attracted to and comment on your vibrancy. You'll sleep like a worn out child and wake up refreshed instead of feeling like you're clawing your way out of a hole. You'll handle problems like an adult, trusting your intuition instead of second guessing your emotions. You'll actually feel joy and gratitude for the little things that you've not had the bandwidth to appreciate. And you'll inspire others with your transformation. Sobriety is contagious. And with alcohol no longer taking up so much time and energy, you and your life will transform. Before we continue, you're probably wondering who I am. Like I said, my name is Colleen Cashman. I'm a life, health, and recovery coach. I have a master's degree in coaching and applied nutrition and multiple professional recovery certifications. I also have personal experience. My sobriety was spontaneous. I experienced the 5 mindset shifts that I'm about to share with you. To be honest, when I quit drinking, I didn't have high expectations. I was just desperate. So, to be able to tell you that I have never once wanted to pour myself a drink, even and especially on hard days, is incredible. I've learned that spontaneous sobriety doesn't rely on willpower. Once you've made the mindset shifts, it doesn't take willpower to not drink alcohol any more than it takes willpower to not drink the hydrogen peroxide or laundry detergent. And that's what led me to discover the 5 shifts. When I first quit drinking, I noticed there were 2 types of people. Some people introduced themselves as alcoholic addicts and talked about having a disease that there was no cure for and how every day was a struggle for the rest of their lives. And then there were people who just identified as non drinkers and talked about sobriety as their superpower. They didn't obsess about their relationship with alcohol because they don't have one anymore. Instead of living with alcoholism, a disease, they overcame what forward thinking experts now call alcohol use disorder. There's a new template for sobriety, and it's allowed me, my clients, and countless others to reclaim their lives. And you're invited to join us. There are 5 key shifts that you must make to experience spontaneous sobriety. And once you make them, you'll be free of your desire to drink. And you'll be able to reclaim your time, energy, joy, and autonomy without feeling like you're giving anything up, because you're not. And I'll walk you through all 5 mindset shifts in this session. Let's get started. Shift number 1 is to acknowledge the truth. If you're watching this because alcohol is a problem for you, the truth is that you're physically dependent on alcohol to at least some degree. When you say the words, I need a drink, and then indeed feel better after that drink, you're speaking the truth. Seeing this truth for myself was a game changer for me. I knew I drank too much, and I felt really bad about myself for not being able to curtail it. I didn't realize until after I quit drinking that the reason it was so hard for me to control myself is that I was actually addicted. When I recognized symptoms of withdrawal after I quit, I realized I had been living in complete denial. I had believed that only alcoholics could be addicted, and I had plenty of evidence that I was not an alcoholic. I was very high functioning. I took great care of my family. I managed all of my commitments. I never let anyone down. I didn't know that the way our culture views alcoholism prevents normal and responsible drinkers from understanding that we are also vulnerable to addiction. In fact, there really is no such thing as an alcoholic. That's an outdated stereotype. Instead, there are people suffering with varying degrees of alcohol use disorder. Alcohol use disorder exists on a spectrum, which means there's no clear line between casual use, psychological dependency, and physical addiction. Do you really need a drink or do you just want one? It's hard to tell. So rate your dependency on a scale of 1 to 10. How necessary is alcohol for your enjoyment? And don't reverse engineer the answer because, of course, you can probably abstain when you need to. It's not like you're going to have a seizure or break out in a sweat. But given the option, how likely are you to drink? And does having a drink lead to having a few drinks that somehow leads to drinking for the rest of the day? That leads to tolerance, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. But for now, know that tolerance is not a sign of a high functioning liver. The more you can drink, the more you'll feel the need to drink. Tolerance is when the brain craves increasing amounts of alcohol to get the desired effect. It's hard evidence of addiction. That's why the first shift is to acknowledge the truth. Once you know where you're at, you can decide where you want to go. The truth is that alcohol is addictive. Regular use is proof of dependency. Let me repeat, if you're a regular drinker, you have some degree of dependency. It's not personal, it's not a weakness, it's biology. It's just like caffeine, sugar, nicotine, or any other addictive substance. The truth we all seem to forget is that alcohol is a drug. As with any drug, the more we use it, the more we need it to feel normal, and the more we experience withdrawals when we don't have it. Alcohol is a drug that triggers 2 to 10 times the dopamine of normal activities. That's why we seek it out. It feels good. Well, right up until the brain is forced to compensate. The excess dopamine in the brain triggers the release of dynorphin, which is the I don't give a shit neurotransmitter. This is critical to survival, lest we end up married in Vegas and decide to celebrate with a free dive off of a skyscraper. Dopamine hits the reward center in the brain, and we want more of what's making us feel good. After a few drinks, when alcohol has slowed our cognitive processing and impaired our motor skills, we may realize that we don't actually need more alcohol. But now the dynorphin has induced apathy. So we think, sure, I'll have one more. Why not? Who cares? This becomes a cycle. Regular drinking changes our brain chemistry. The more we drink, the worse we feel. Once the brain gets used to artificially high levels of dopamine, it stops producing dopamine on its own, like when we hug a friend, read a book, or even have sex. Over time, we lose the ability to feel pleasure during everyday activities. Low levels of pleasure, also known as feel good endorphins, combined with the lingering apathy of dynorphin, trigger drug seeking behavior. It becomes a cycle. We need a fix to feel good again, which means that each drink creates a craving for the next drink, undermining our best intentions to moderate. Remember that alcohol is a drug. As the drug wears off, you're left in a state of withdrawal. The state of withdrawal from any drug is always the exact opposite of the drug's effects. It's just like how sugar wakes you up only to leave you feeling lethargic in a few hours, or how tired and cranky you feel if you miss your morning coffee. When you drink alcohol to reduce stress and anxiety, the net result is actually more stress and anxiety. That's just the way drugs work. And it explains why it's so difficult to have just one drink. You don't like the way it feels when it starts to wear off. And finally, as I said earlier, the higher your tolerance, the greater your level of addiction. Tolerance is a sign of dependence, not a high functioning liver, which is what I used to believe. I thought my need and ability to drink were ingrained in my DNA, but that isn't true. The brain has to learn how to cope while intoxicated. So, as demonstrated by Pavlov's dogs who salivate in response to a bell, the brain pre releases dopamine and dynorphin when we start drinking. This is why sometimes the first drink doesn't even feel like anything. And contrary to popular opinion, tolerance can't be reset to what it was, even with extended periods of abstinence. It's a skill set that you develop. Your brain doesn't forget. It's like riding a bike. Even if you take a few years or a few decades off, you never need training wheels again. And that leads us to shift number 2. It's time to review your reality. We've only scratched the surface about how alcohol changes our brain chemistry. As you know, brain chemistry determines how we experience life. It drives our behavior. It determines success and failure. That's why there's $1 billion market for pharmaceuticals that promise to make you feel and perform better. As you learn how alcohol affects brain chemistry, it's critical that you review your own reality. Compare your experience with the facts and see for yourself. Have you ever noticed that you actually feel worse after drinking than before you started? There is a simple reason that stopping after one drink has come to feel impossible. And it's not because you're an asshole with no willpower. You have willpower in other areas of your life, right? Where does it go when you drink? Let's look and see. The natural state of a non drinker is calm. Spikes of cortisol and adrenaline are normal in response to stress, and spikes in dopamine are normal in response to pleasure. But the brain recovers quickly and maintains a state of equilibrium. In the next chart, we see how alcohol artificially triggers feelings of pleasure. Remember, 2 to 10 times the level of other activities. But the high level of sensation doesn't last long. The brain has to release stress hormones to keep us alert, lest we get too relaxed and forget to breathe. After a few drinks, high levels of the drug compete with high levels of stress hormones. Review your own reality. Have you honestly checked in with yourself after 3 glasses or a bottle of wine? Are you still feeling as good as you did with the first few sips? Likely, you're mostly numb and a bit agitated, which is why finishing the bottle becomes a foregone conclusion. The caveat is that the alcohol wears off faster than the stress hormones, which can actually remain elevated for days. This is why we usually fall asleep easily when we're intoxicated, only to wake up too early, feeling restless and agitated. And the next day, even if we aren't physically hungover, our stress is elevated. The last graph becomes our full time reality when we drink on a regular basis. We don't even realize we're in a chronic state of anxiety because high levels of stress hormones feel normal to us. This reality speaks to one of the earliest benefits that I experienced when I quit drinking. I used to joke that yoga, meditation, and 3 glasses of wine were all I needed to relax, except it wasn't a joke, and I meant an entire bottle. But within a few days of not drinking, I noticed a huge difference in the way my body felt. I had gotten so used to the ever present tension and tightness in my solar plexus that I didn't even notice until it was gone. I've always thought of stress as a set of external circumstances, the people and problems of life, but it's actually an internal experience driven largely by our brain chemistry. Pouring a shit ton of alcohol into our body on a regular basis is one of the most stressful things we can do. The reality is that alcohol does not reduce stress, it causes stress. And this is a game changer in the motivation to quit drinking, especially if one of the primary reasons you drink is to reduce stress. Alcohol also robs you of your natural ability to manage your emotions. With chronically elevated stress hormones, high levels of the I don't give a shit neurotransmitter, and impaired dopamine function, is it any surprise that regular drinking leads to a deterioration of mental health? That's another thing I noticed pretty quickly. The tangled wires of melodrama, chaos, and noise in my head began to unravel, all on their own. Alcohol also reduces your ability to feel pleasure in everyday life. When was the last time you truly felt calm and at peace, or laughed from the depths of your belly without being intoxicated? I hadn't realized I was missing out on the simple joys in life until after I stopped drinking. As my cortisol levels dropped and my dopamine recalibrated, my emotions evened out. I saw just how miserable I had been. I had been pretending to be okay. I went through all the motions of life. I hugged my kids and smiled at my husband's corny jokes and mirrored empathy where it was needed. But the truth is, I had stopped giving a shit about anything, including myself. I was just surviving throughout the day and then numbing and dumbing myself in the evening. I was caught in a wicked cycle, and I am so grateful to have escaped. I reached a point that I was so miserable that I didn't even see the point of drinking anymore. And that was a good day. That led me to discover the truth that I'm now sharing with you. Alcohol doesn't actually make you feel better. In fact, the pleasure that you feel from the first drink is simply due to the relief from the withdrawal created by the last drink. It's like wearing your belt too tight so that you can feel good when you take it off. If you've developed a tolerance to alcohol, it's not that drinking helps you relax or makes you happy. It's that not drinking feels stressful and unhappy due to withdrawals. You're not drinking anymore because you choose to. You're drinking because you need to. And now that you know the truth about what alcohol is doing to your physical and mental health, let's move into shift 3 and evaluate the options. Unfortunately, for millions of people, they seem pretty limited. You can either try to moderate your drinking as you have been, or admit you're an alcoholic. When you fail to moderate, you feel sick and anxious, and you have to collect the puzzle pieces of things you said and did. And so you promise yourself you'll change. That's it. No more. You're done. And so you work hard throughout the day, eating healthy, exercising, thinking positive, and searching for answers in self-help books, which leads you to rethink the problem and realize that you just need new rules. You'll only drink on weekends with friends. You'll stop buying wine at the grocery and limit yourself to 2 drinks or 3 max. Your new resolve to drink less might work for a bit, but eventually you'll drink too much again, only to wake up sick and anxious and right back where you started. But so far, that's better than the alternative, which is to feel enough shame to accept that you have an incurable disease and admit you're an alcoholic. You'll shamefully have to tell all of your family and friends, many of whom drink as much or more than you do, that you have a problem and that now you must avoid social settings because you can't be around alcohol anymore. You'll need to attend 12-step meetings where you have to admit that you're powerless, take inventory of all your failures and defects, and start making amends for everything that's ever gone wrong. You're told sobriety is a constant struggle and that you can only live one day at a time. Should you ever relapse, any progress you've made will be canceled, and you'll be right back where you started with feelings of shame. Is it any wonder why so many of us hide our problems with alcohol? The truth is that neither of these models work for most people. Moderation is too hard. Remember what I said about tolerance? The brain doesn't forget. And only a small percentage of people in conventional treatment maintain long-term sobriety. They're clear up front. You will never recover. But I'm here to tell you that is not true. There is a simple and better path to freedom. You don't have to struggle with moderation or live with a stigma of self-inflicted disease. You're not powerless. There's nothing wrong with you, and you can heal. Following these 4 steps will cancel your desire to drink so you can jump off this not so merry-go-round and move on with the rest and best of your life. The first thing you must do is commit to sobriety short term. Run an experiment for 30, 60, 90 days, or even a year. Honestly, the more time you give yourself, the easier it will be. Internal arguments about when or why you're going to drink again are exhausting. Choose a time frame that feels reasonable. Make a commitment and don't think about it again. Can you do that? How would it feel to know you don't have to worry about alcohol for at least a month or even a year? How would it feel to give yourself the space and time to figure this out? Rest assured that you don't have to decide that you're giving up alcohol forever. Sobriety is the vehicle in this experiment, not the destination. But if you're dependent on alcohol to at least some degree, and you want to know if life really is better with alcohol, you have to break the addiction. Within a few weeks, your stress hormones will drop dramatically, and your dopamine production will start to return to normal. The farther away you get from the last drink, the less you'll crave the next drink. The cycle will be broken. Each day will get easier, and each week you'll get stronger. In fact, if you decide to start with only 1 month, you'll likely be surprised when you renew your commitment. It's just like how the first glass of wine orders the second and the second orders the third. Sobriety is also self-sustaining. It feels good to feel good. The next step is to reclaim your power. This is in direct opposition to the first step that newly acknowledged alcoholics must take. They must agree that they are powerless. Does that sound like a strong start to a fun journey? The decision to quit drinking is powerful. As you contemplate it, Does what I'm saying infuse you with determination and courage and hope? Even though you've struggled with alcohol, there is nothing wrong with you or your ability to make good decisions for yourself. Before you started this webinar, you probably didn't realize that addiction was in play or that alcohol is a drug as dangerous as any other. Now you do, and that makes you powerful, not powerless. I also suggest that you ban the word alcoholic and all that goes with it from your vocabulary. It's prejudiced and perpetuates bias and stereotype. Drinkers who drink too much have alcohol use disorder. People who quit drinking become non drinkers. Think about it. People who quit smoking are not referred to as cigaretteaholics for the rest of their lives. They don't have to go to meetings and apologize to everyone they've ever smoked in front of. No, we congratulate the new smokers for their smoke free status. We move on. Giving up alcohol deserves the same upgrade in status. Now, this stigma associated with giving up alcohol does rest on moral failings and character defects. But contrary to popular opinion, the failings and defects are not yours. On the simple and better path to freedom from alcohol, you'll need to observe the gaslighting. We've been manipulated by corporate propaganda into blaming people for getting addicted instead of holding the industry that sells an addictive product responsible. Big alcohol spends billions on advertising to normalize drinking. Alcohol is the only drug we have to justify not using. Even worse, conventional treatments basically function as public service announcements for the bullshit marketing strategy that cautions all of us to please drink responsibly. The truth is that alcohol is an addictive, psychoactive, neurotoxic, class 1 carcinogen. Responsible use doesn't apply to alcohol any more than it does cocaine or heroin. There's no such thing as responsible drinking. People can and do become addicted and suffer health consequences even with government approved responsible use. And then we shame those that suffer, tell them it's their fault, and mark them with the scarlet letter A for addict for the rest of their lives, even after they quit drinking. The only moral failings and character flaws you'll need to address belong to the industry that profits greatly from your addiction. Look at this recent ad that came out during the pandemic. Parents are being encouraged to hashtag take a moment in discreet locations such as their bathroom, garage, or closet. In hindsight, drinking in private was exactly the behavior that led to my own alcohol use disorder. We're told to drink responsibly. How about their obligation to market responsibly? The simple and better way to freedom from alcohol requires that you trust yourself, which is probably something you haven't been able to do for a while thanks to alcohol. But can you see why and how that has happened? Your brain has been hijacked. Just like a fish is unaware of the water that it swims in, drinkers are blind to the cultural psychosis. And that's why so many of us end up drinking like fish, excuse my pun. But once you re examine your relationship with alcohol using the simple and better way, you'll have to challenge your own bullshit too. Regardless of how high quality your organic cocktail mix is or how mature that vintage Cabernet is, alcohol is ethanol. For good reason. It's used as an antiseptic, preservative, and industrial solvent. It's also in rocket fuel, paint, perfumes, and cleaning agents. Yeah. And meanwhile, we're obsessing about gluten, GMOs, and MSGs. And we're debating the pros and cons of the paleo, keto, and vegan diets, while intermittent fasting, juicing, cleansing, and detoxing. We can discuss telomeres, epigenetics, and autoimmune disorders like PhD candidates. We worry about the downstream effects of the latest vaccines. We have such high standards in our health conscious, green minded, organic, and non toxic culture. Meanwhile, we're guzzling rocket fuel like it's the fountain of youth. Trust yourself to do better now that you know better. The simple and better path realigns your personal integrity. When you care about your health and well being, you cannot drink copious amounts of red wine because it has minuscule amounts of resveratrol. Eat a grape. Part of the reason alcohol use disorder is so miserable is because deep down, we know that we're poisoning our bodies and brains. We feel it, and our true self objects. Unlike the conventional path that transforms your identity into that of an alcoholic, the simple and better path transforms you back to your authentic self. Sobriety need not define who you are. It's simply a form of self care. This isn't about being sober, this is about getting well. If you're like I was, you're worried that when you quit drinking, you'll lose the best parts of yourself. You won't be any fun anymore. You'll be boring and old and out of touch. But I can tell you that is so not true. No one I know who has quit drinking, not my clients, myself, or any of the other amazing non drinkers that I've met, have come to regret their decision because they've lost a part of themselves. In fact, we've retained our personalities and leveled up to be the best version of ourselves. This leads us to shift four, which is to transform your identity. The first thing that I did and that I encourage my clients to do is to find role models. If drinking is an intrinsic part of your culture, you may not even know anyone else who doesn't drink. I had that problem too. So let me introduce you to the founding members of my personal sobriety support team. Celebrities like Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach, Brene Brown, Robert Downey Jr., Dax Shepard, Jason Bateman, and Eminem have inspired me to stay the course. Their recovery has informed my own. You need to find role models, and celebrities count. I also read sobriety memoirs. The genre is referred to as quit lit. There are many famous as well as normal everyday people whose stories have helped me and will help you find your sea legs. And there are literally thousands of voices on social media sharing inspiration, education, and awareness. You can't recover in isolation. And until you're able to find some sober buddies in real life, rely on the celebrities, authors, coaches, and regular old sober strangers that are open and proud of their recovery. I can't stress this enough. Immerse yourself in a culture of sobriety. Find and follow role models to keep you on course. Next, you'll need to rewrite the story you tell yourself. Our stories define our reality far more than the actual circumstances. You now know the truth about alcohol. How will that change the story you tell yourself about why you're quitting? You can focus on how much you miss having alcohol in your life. That's not going to be a lot of fun. Or you can focus on what you're not missing now that you're not drinking. If you were having that much fun, you wouldn't be watching this webinar. Are you really going to miss this? It's just like overcoming lifestyle induced diabetes. The cure is to eliminate the cause. Diabetics who refuse to change what they eat and how they live will suffer as their health continues to decline. That's the victim version of the story. Or diabetics can give up the processed sugary junk foods, follow a nutrient dense diet, and literally reverse the disease within weeks. That's the survivor version. Whatever you tell yourself, that's what will be true for you. Which means you also need to choose carefully the story you tell others. You're literally going to want to write this down. Practice it like a speech. People will ask you why you're not drinking. You are absolutely not obligated to discuss your former dependence on alcohol, especially at parties with people who are drinking. Set a boundary and respect your own privacy. Talk about how good it feels to not drink. It's just like if you've ever given up something like soda pop or dairy. It's not a big deal if you don't make it a big deal. Frame your story from a place of empowerment. You've made an amazing change in your life. Communicate that with pride. And finally, in order to transform your identity, you'll need to relearn how to identify and then honor your own needs. As a busy mom with 4 kids, an ex husband, a new husband, and 3 stepkids, and many activities, commitments, and responsibilities, alcohol was a crutch that allowed me to cope. It wasn't all bad. It worked until it didn't work anymore. But over time, alcohol became a way for me to avoid myself I never stopped taking care of everyone else. I just stopped taking care of me. When I quit drinking, I had to learn how to not only identify my own needs, but also honor them. I had to rest when I was tired, say no when it would have been easier to say yes, set boundaries, and take responsibility for my feelings instead of just ignoring them to keep everyone else happy. Quitting drinking was actually pretty easy for me. Learning how to take care of myself was the real challenge. But that's the reason we're on this planet. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And staying in that experience instead of using alcohol to escape is the most rewarding thing we'll ever do. And finally, in shift 5, you'll need to invest in sobriety. The first thing I do with new clients who have just stopped drinking is to put the cost of recovery into perspective. We've calculated the money that they're spending on alcohol and alcohol related purchases, and we look at the time they spent drinking or recovering from drinking. And we look at the mental and emotional costs of living with addiction. We do that to establish a budget of money, time, and energy for recovery. In the beginning, at least the first few days, it's a bit of a wash. But very quickly, sobriety pays off in dividends. The first and most important step to take when you quit drinking is to find a mentor because actions precede thoughts, which precede feelings. You can't think or feel your way into action. You have to act your way into thinking and feeling the way you want to. Think about it. How long have you felt bad about drinking? How long have you thought about change? If thoughts and feelings were enough, you wouldn't be watching this webinar. The new thoughts of resolve and feelings of hope that you're having right now won't sustain change either. First, you must act and set yourself up for success. Find a mentor to support you with accountability and guidance. You must ask a human being for help. You've been hiding the truth from everyone, including yourself. The first thing you must do is get out of your head and seek an objective perspective like the one you're hearing from me today. And don't worry, you don't have to come out to friends and family until you are ready. That's not what I'm talking about. I didn't even tell my husband that I had quit drinking for several weeks. I just carried around my regular Yeti like nothing had changed. But privately, I hired a coach. I needed accountability and guidance. I couldn't solve my problems with the same thinking and the same feelings that had created them, and neither can you. The hope and resolve that you are feeling right now wouldn't be there if you hadn't taken action and watched this webinar. But now you realize how easy taking action can be. You clicked the Watch Me button, and now you're here. So continue to take action. Find a mentor for accountability and guidance. And, this is important, work only with qualified professionals. I have heard so many stories and seen so many people who are suffering because well intentioned but completely unqualified lay people instruct newly sober sponsees to go off or stay off their mental health medications, or insist an amend be made to an abusive ex partner, or even suggesting that jelly beans are the best way to handle sugar cravings. No, no, and no. Make sure any doctor, therapist, or coach that you work with has appropriate training in addiction recovery and even nutrition and lifestyle modification, too. Conduct an interview before you hire anyone. Next, calculate the money, time, and energy that you've been spending on alcohol and establish a recovery budget. Allocate resources to your healing process. You might need to take some time off work if withdrawals end up causing insomnia, which can happen. Don't worry, it passes in a few days. You will definitely want some headroom to recalibrate. Purchase books, join online communities, or hire a coach to ensure that you have the support you need as you transition. Pay attention to yourself. Journal, meditate, move your body, give yourself space. Show yourself the same kindness and compassion that you bestow on others. Respect this as a process, which means you have to adjust your expectations. Healing takes time. While every day moving forward will feel better than living with addiction, depending on how much and how long you've been drinking, it will take time for your mental and physical health to be restored. Alcohol destroys our reserves. Your brain chemistry will have to recalibrate, and until it does, you may feel mildly depressed or foggy. You may also be chronically dehydrated and even nutritionally deficient. Your gut health has been compromised. Also, many people with alcohol use disorder have become hypo or hyperglycemic and even insulin resistant. Don't let this scare you. Whatever issues arise are already in play. Symptoms are usually temporary, and all the more reason that you need to work with a professional mentor who's qualified in recovery. So, today I've promised to show you how to overcome your dependence on alcohol, even if you can't imagine life without it, and how to shift from drinker to non drinker without losing your identity and rediscovering your authenticity. We talked about how to frame the decision to quit drinking from a place of strength instead of weakness, and how to move forward with clarity, energy, and motivation without getting sidetracked for cravings for alcohol. We've talked about how to stop drinking without feeling like you're missing out or being punished, and how to ascend to a new level of vitality and self assurance that people around you will notice and compliment. We've talked about how to navigate social settings like a badass without drinking alcohol, and how to quit drinking because you want to, not because you have to. I've given you the 5 shifts to freedom. The first, acknowledge the truth. You're dependent on alcohol, and that's why you're struggling. Second, review your reality. This isn't as fun as you think it is. Then evaluate the options. Do you want to keep going as you are? Do you want to accept that you're an alcoholic? Or do you want to take the simple path to freedom? On that path, you'll reconstruct your identity by finding role models and carefully choosing the story of your circumstances. And finally, you'll have to invest in sobriety. Finding somebody to hold you accountable and give you good guidance is key. And now you have a choice. You know better, and you can seize the opportunity to do better for yourself. If you're tired of trying to follow rules to control your drinking, and of being secretly jealous of people who have given up alcohol, and of breaking your promise to cut back, and of pretending that you drink less than you do, and feeling embarrassed by your behavior when you drink, if you're tired of sabotaging your best efforts to eat healthy and exercise, and of planning your life around when and how often you drink, and of feeling exhausted and lacking the energy and resilience to handle your own life, and finally, if you're tired of wishing you drank less and feeling hopeless about your ability to change, you're ready to experience spontaneous sobriety. Are you ready? Are you ready to feel confident and free, to reclaim your mental health along with your focus, time, energy, and vitality? Are you ready for people to notice that you look so good and seem so calm and ask you what your secret is? Are you excited to see what superpowers will emerge as you change your story, your trajectory, and pull your shit together? Then here's what I have for you. I've set aside time in the next 48 hours to speak to you personally. This is the action you can take. On our session, I will help you make a game plan to free yourself from alcohol and feel like it's the best decision you've ever made. I've got not only the education, but the experience to help you move forward. Book your breakthrough session with me. It's absolutely free. It won't cost you a thing to take the action that you'll look back and say was the best thing you ever did. But I do need to pause here for a second. This isn't for everyone. This is only for you if alcohol use disorder is your primary problem and you are otherwise healthy, and you're high functioning and you are motivated to feel good. if you have experience with eliminating unhealthy habits or products from your diet and lifestyle. And finally, you inherently understand that rainbows and unicorns are not typical on day one of sobriety. There is work to be done. You may be wondering why I'm doing this. Well, as you'll discover when you experience spontaneous sobriety, there are many of us who are open about our recovery and willing and able to help others cross over into the light. Personally, I was a drinker in both identity and practice for 30 years, and someone answered my call and helped me get started. I'm paying it forward. Also, connection is the antidote for addiction, mine included. It helps me to help others. I've also made the conscious choice to recover out loud. Sobriety needs to be normalized so that people who are suffering know there's a way out. And finally, proper support accelerates recovery. I've learned a lot in my own journey and from the many clients I've coached who have gone through early recovery. We can discuss my 8-week program and see if it's a good fit for both of us. And if not, that's fine too. So go to ColleenCashman.com/apply. There's 2 L's and 2 E's in Colleen and 2 N's in Cashman. Spaces are very limited. It's just me. So sign up now. And when you click that button, you'll be taken to my calendar page. You will see my available appointments. After that, you'll be taken to a brief application process. Please answer the questions honestly. I promise that your breakthrough session will be a turning point for you, not because of who I am, but because of who you are ready to become. The voice tugging on your heart right now, it's not mine, it's yours from the other side of addiction. It's your future self, your best self, inviting you to level up. It's time to evolve and kick the bullshit to the curb. Someday soon, you'll describe the decision to book this call as the beginning of your transformation, the moment you experienced spontaneous sobriety. I'll talk to you soon, but even if I don't, just know there's a better way. Quitting drinking has absolutely changed my life. It is the single most best thing I've ever done.